New York has been through so many crises. 9/11, the pandemic.
Affordability crisis. Expensive city.
It's like 1970s New York, a Scorsese movie that we're living in.
Well, if I could choose multiple jurisdictions across the world to acquire an asset, why am I going to acquire New York?
People have opportunities to deploy capital in other markets. Miami, Palm Beach, Aspen, Montana.
Despite high cost of living, people continue to move here in droves.
That speaks to you, that attracts you. And I always come back to that word energy. I think it can't be replicated.
But I think what's harder to quantify is the human return on investment. But I think we have to stay focused on keeping it worth it. As one does, but he's being a sustainable, responsible consumer, recycling.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that is?
Are we starting?
You Upper East Sider?
I'm all about sustainability.
You guys don't? Oh, yeah?
Yeah, totally recycle. Yeah.
That's good. Because people have said that there's stats that are like, you recycle, but only, 10% of it is actually diverted into, which is frustrating because, you painstakingly drop your items into the blue, and it's like, are we just making ourselves feel good, or is this actually helping the earth?
I mean, listen, I'm sure there's some, probably a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
But, if aggregate, everyone is contributing to sustainability, then, there's 10, 20% of the world as opposed to none.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well, New York City has just introduced mandatory composting.
Yeah.
Do you do that? There we go. We found a little glitch in the system.
But I do try and keep my dog from urinating on the
that's nice.
On the containers that are sitting on the curb.
What a lovely citizen
of
New York. Which is a great segue to, one of our first topics of season 2, which is New York still worth it? So just one.
Wow.
You get just yes or no.
Yes.
And yes.
Of course it is, right?
Why, of course? Because some people, especially people outside of New York City, look in, they see headlines and they're like, what do you mean it's worth it? Affordability crisis, expensive city. And I think it's easy to read the headlines. I always chuckle when someone's, get like a text like, is everything okay? It's like, yeah.
Do you really get people with that kind of concern?
But people, I was having a conversation at this event we were actually at with someone.
That you and I were at?
We were at, yeah.
Yeah. Should we acknowledge, I feel like we should acknowledge a little bit of the audience. I was thinking about, when we're talking to one another, is there some level of bringing people in, our audience, our one listener?
I think
Jack.
Do what feels natural.
Jack.
Yeah.
My dog. Jack. Go ahead.
Someone was mentioning that, someone texted them, this woman I met at that event texted them and was like, are you okay? You take the subway? With just kind of incredulous.
Really? Yeah.
You forget what the papers,
how
they describe New York.
The media. Yeah.
The media.
Yeah.
And, I was looking at crime statistics. Now, of course, the data is not perfect. The definition of certain crimes can change, which throws off the stats, but there are some, like the major crimes are independently verified, and in pretty much every major category it's at historic lows in New York City. Yet if you read the daily news or the Post, you would think something totally different.
It's like 1970s New York, a Scorsese movie that we're living in, Taxi Driver or something. And I think we're going to get into this. I know we will, because, to me, it's really important to kind of shut out the noise, because it has always been a city. First of all, crime has always been a part of
it's a big city.
Major city.
Any major city.
8 million plus people.
Lots of people.
Sure, those stats, are going to probably be, it's all relative to, Idaho, right?
Sure.
So I do think, you just kind of have to filter that out in a lot of ways. And you're right. I remember when I was younger living in Chicago and the things that I would hear about New York or other cities that were just distorted.
Yeah.
So I think, it's important to kind of filter out.
And for the people who live here or spend any time here, even visiting, I think it becomes clear very quickly that New York hasn't lost its luster.
Or desirability.
I think there are quite a few headwinds, particularly in the real estate world. I think what's so cool about real estate is that it's a bellwether for what's going on in people's lives, how they're feeling about their life, the economy. We often see those chinks earlier.
Sure.
Meaning we often see the early signs of people feeling uncertain, people being worried, in the sense that people may stop buying, or people may choose to rent instead of buy, or people may be hearing about a pied-à-terre tax, which just passed yesterday in New York State, and wonder, well, if I could choose multiple jurisdictions across the world to acquire an asset, why am I going to acquire New York? Those sorts of things. So I agree, New York hasn't lost its luster or desirability, and also there are some real considerations that people,
some challenges
for sure. As many large metropolitan areas across the world, not just the U.S. are facing.
And let's just, it's so topical right now to talk a little bit about that pied-à-terre tax, right? Because that was just approved yesterday, so it's fresh news. And actually, let's just, from what we can, help kind of elaborate on it, break it down a bit, because it is new, and it's the idea that people with second homes, it's called the pied-à-terre tax, which means it's not your primary residence. Right. So people with second homes will now be taxed according to Department of Finance. What's the word?
Valuations?
Yeah, assessment. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, assessments. So,
but there's a key caveat.
Yes.
It's that is the metric for the first 2 years.
Right.
So there's a 2-year introductory phase-in period where the value that determines whether you get taxed or not is by kind of an antiquated Department of Finance assessment of your home, which is typically much less
than market value.
Yeah, magnitudes less. Yeah. So there'll be a lot of units that will qualify after this phase-in period, and they change the metric by which they use, which is still TBD. Frustrating for many of us in the real estate world and potential buyers who are wondering, well, okay, after this 2-year period, will my property, which will then move to sort of a market, some sort of
closer to market
value assessment, but again, still hasn't been worked out or revealed. That uncertainty almost universally leads to hesitation.
But I think what's key, and always, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and you and I have talked about this, is New York has been through so many, and particularly in recent years, so many crises that people react to, and it's a knee-jerk reaction. 9/11, the pandemic, where there's this oh my God, danger, initial reaction, and again, knee-jerk reaction. And I think this was literally approved yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's so new, it's so fresh, and everybody's reacting, and the media is always looking for those kind of sound bites that get people worked up. Our job is not to parrot what the media is saying, but actually help our clients remain calm. There's a lot of wait and see of how this program will be implemented and its impact in the short, long term on buyer activity, for instance. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to kind of stay focused and help our clients navigate this market.
Well, the other thing is that there are ways around it. As anything new like this, people will find a way. Some are condoned, and I'm sure some will be thought up by CPAs that are scrambling to
100%.
For example, if immediate family member is residing there, that exempts you. There are like plenty of other exemptions, so it's not a blanket policy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of noise. There's another policy that has been getting, it's just a proposal, so not anything that has passed, and the general sentiment right now is that it's dead on arrival, which is another tax on cash purchases in New York City above $1 million. So a tax on people who are paying cash. That doesn't look like it's going anywhere.
Right.
But what I will say is even the rhetoric around it can make it feel like New York is less welcoming to people who are investing in the city. And mind you, even with this additional tax, like the pied-à-terre tax, they're still paying their property taxes. So this is in addition to that. I don't think anyone would disagree that we have a real affordability crisis in the city and a housing shortage. And I'm hopeful that the new administration, well, they have some very extreme policies. They seem to be really working with developers, which is different from some of the rhetoric on the campaign trail, to find a way to build quickly and not at such exorbitant costs,
right,
which has been the standard in the past.
Right.
So I hope that comes to fruition.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by it's a wait and see. This is all like very early
Yeah.
new stages. So
Yeah.
we'll see how things play out.
I think the hardest thing is for the outside consumer looking in, who's not living this every day and kind of digging into the details. It can feel very confusing, and it's very easy with so much information coming at us all the time to just look at the headline and take it as fact. And so it definitely, everything, right?
Yeah.
You can apply that to many things,
Right.
but for our purposes, to your point, just shutting out the noise and being really focused on, how we're supporting clients through any sort of transaction, whether it's here in New York or other places in the world.
And you think about, the luxury buyer and the luxury market, right? I mean, those buyers, and again, we're talking about people with, the resources to own second homes and not have, and at least two often. But, they have opportunities to deploy capital in other markets. Miami, Palm Beach, Aspen,
Much
Montana.
more tax-friendly places.
Right. I mean, in
Nevada.
fact, I was reading yesterday that a certain billionaire has now, looks like he may be relocating from California to Argentina. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah.
Do you care to share who that?
Yeah,
it's
well,
public.
it's actually Peter Thiel.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
why
apparently
Argentina?
he's bought.
Are they wooing him with?
Yes, they
Yeah, of
are,
course.
because there's been a new president or prime minister, I think president in the last couple of years, who's more libertarian and is more aligned in terms of his mindset and has been looking to attract, capital.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's a perfect way to reinforce why, despite New York being a, let's call it, harder place to live, I don't think anyone would say it's an easy place to live. But it's such an incredible place to live.
Yep.
And there's a reason why, despite, high cost of living, etc., people continue to move here in droves and seek it out for the community, for the energy, and for the opportunity. And that's something that's really hard to see in the numbers.
Right.
And some might push back and challenge that and say, well, I can see it very clearly in the numbers. If I'm not here, I'm not paying a city tax, right, on my income or investment gains. But I think what's harder to quantify is the human return on investment from having a presence here, from being here. And part of that, even if you're not here full time, is having a home base here, from which to be engaged, be here, do business, see friends, entertain, take
culture.
Advantage of everything that the city has to offer, culture, etc. Yeah,
I think it's something that you just said, and I think about it often, because that's, we're asked, and I may have said this before, but we're often asked, what is it about New York that speaks to you? That attracts you? And I always come back to that word, energy.
Yeah.
It's the energy and vibrancy. I mean, I think it can't be replicated. And right now there are efforts to, and who knows what the future holds, but for instance, to transform South Florida, Miami specifically, and make it more of a hub, attracting different, and great.
Texas as well,
exactly.
I mean, JP Morgan now has more employees in Texas than New York.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's something that I hope the current administration is taking note of.
I would hope so too,
and
because we can't afford to kind of drain the city of certain businesses, right?
There's correct, and the tax base that the city relies on to support all these really important social programs. It's important.
Yeah.
So the point, something that's been all over the news, is the kind of resurrection of the tax the rich rhetoric, and using Ken Griffin and his penthouse purchase as a emblem of that. And he shot back and pointed to his philanthropic contributions, but also the tax contributions from the employees, at his firm. And I think, both sides have a point, which what tends to frustrate me is, like, why do we need to demonize one group to get something that we want?
And I agree with that. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I'm not naive. This is the political game. He's pandering to his base. He's thinking about the next election and the fact that if he is going to, secure that base, that he has to give them some sound bites that make them feel like he hasn't deviated too much from what he was saying on the campaign trail. But I do think that there is a risk of New York feeling very unfriendly to business because of it.
Sure. But I think, to your point before, it is like, that's what I mean by shutting out the noise, because those are the sound bites and the rhetoric that we hear. And it's not just on a local level, but it's also national, right? So, and international. So I think, we find ourselves reacting to those sorts of messaging, but then we find that things just all of that kind of falls by the wayside moving along. And I would 100% bet that there's communication, there's dialogue behind the scenes that we're simply just not aware of, right? Because
these are bargaining tools on the public stage.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I'm threatening to move more of my employees to Florida or Texas.
Right.
What are you going to do? You made a public blunder. You're getting some flack for it.
Right.
Let's come back to the table.
Let's take that and apply it to what we do on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is negotiating on the behalf of our clients, whether it's buyers, sellers, or tenants that we represent, right? Yeah. And we are not just on the receiving end at times in terms of negotiating with a broker or somebody on the side of that similar kind of bluster, but we also return it in kind as appropriate. We're appropriate in terms of representing our clients. It's what I find is just bluster, and it's a game. And so that's what we do. And then, but it's also
part of negotiation.
That's right. It's part of the process of negotiating and creating dialogue or not, So I don't know. Yeah. Well, I do know. I feel like it's just a lot of sound bites, a lot of rhetoric, but yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that the people who are serious about investing in New York, like, I'm separating the hobbyists, the lookers, people who are curious about investing in New York real estate, whether residential or commercial, and the serious buyers. Nothing has changed for the serious buyers. They're long-term oriented.
Sure.
And
understand the value of investing in this market. And it will always have appeal.
And understanding that the return is not exclusively financial.
Yes,
that there's a big human element to it. I think no one's under the impression that Manhattan real estate appreciation is what it was 25 years ago. And you could say the same for London or other major metros. But there is a huge value for having a physical presence here, having a home.
Yeah.
Home is really important.
Yeah. Walking out on the street.
Especially for people who are traveling all around the, especially for people who maybe this isn't their primary residence. Having a place that's not a hotel that feels like their sanctuary is really important.
Yeah. To plop your bags down, spend some time here, go out on the street, hop in a taxi, be in an Uber, go to theater, or just, again, being on the street, the energy and vibrancy that really stimulates us. So
I was at an event last night and someone shared a new term that I hadn't heard, which is pied-à-terre. instead of pied-à-terre, which is people who lived in New York for a long time during maybe their professional career. They retired. Maybe they now live in Florida or some other warm locale, but they still have all of their doctors here, and they don't want to. Those relationships extend over decades, and so they basically have a place purely for coming back.
Meta as in
medical.
MED. I thought meta META as
yes,
in
/meta
Facebook. Meta.
Right.
Yeah.
Medical.
Right. Sure.
So just one expression of why someone would do that.
Yeah.
But well, my but is always that I think we need to be looking inward for. I don't think you can tax your way out of a fiscal
budget
gap.
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing to do, and I think it sets a really poor precedent for the future. I think with all the incredible technology that we have, there's no reason that we shouldn't be applying it to, and I'm sure there are things underway to do this, and hopefully we'll see those efficiencies come to fruition in the future. But it doesn't just feel like this. If you look at the New York City budget over the last decade, we've just continued adding to it. Most companies, before they go and add expenditure, they look, well, are there some efficiencies that we could
eliminate?
That we could drive? Are there efficiencies that we could leverage and capture? Now, it's a slightly reductive take. Business and operating the largest municipal government in the country are two slightly different things.
Slightly, but there's similar.
But some shared principles overlap. For sure.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And
So again, time will tell. Time will tell. But I do also want to emphasize the resiliency of a city like New York. And we've been here before. We've had these moments of, again, danger, like the sky is falling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. Something else I was thinking of, when you and I were in Miami for Art Basel this past year, and meeting with developers, meeting with brokers, colleagues in that market, and there was a lot of the narrative, the messaging at similar to now was that there's a mass exodus from New York City to Miami, and the brokers and our colleagues were saying, well, we haven't seen it, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's why it's got to kind of like shuffle through that, and really stay focused, and again, help guide our clients through it and remain level-headed through it all.
Yeah.
So
the answer to our kickoff question is yes.
New York is
still worth it.
Yep, 100%.
I think we have to stay focused on keeping it worth it, and making it easier for people to do business here. I come from a startup background before real estate, and often talk with other founders about, why do you build here? Right? You could build tons of other places, Miami, San Francisco, Detroit. There are lots of hubs now that have really compelling ecosystems, and I think there's still a feeling like, yes, there's a reason to be here. There's always a but, but it is harder, and it feels a lot harder than it used to be. And so that's an opportunity for us.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for us to get creative and tack back to helping people who are, injecting a lot of energy, of ideas, innovation, and hopefully economic activity into the city.
Yeah. And on top of that, yet, there is a but at the same time, what we do and what we see on the ground on a daily basis is people coming in, new people here, clients that get referred to us because people are relocating or relocating from other geographies coming to New York City, right? Yep. So, and we see that on a daily basis.
Yep.
So, yes, there may be some outflow, but there's always inflow.
Yeah.
Influx.
Yeah. Influx. I think what's interesting is that a lot of, it's normal, you move to a new city, you may not buy an apartment or a home immediately, and so you rent. And, we do a lot of business with people who are relocating or people who are just looking for somewhere new in New York. And it feels like the rental market and the transactions, I've never seen it so crazy.
Right.
Meaning every transaction feels like you're doing a sale, meaning the amount of work,
You could speak to that,
competition.
Right?
Just worked with some clients, and they were looking for a 3-bedroom, which is a particularly competitive segment in New York. It's very desirable. And
these are already clients of ours in a way, indirectly.
And we probably outbid. We were outbid maybe 3-4 times.
I think it's 4 times. Yeah.
And
you put so much work and effort into that process with these, these clients.
Yeah. And people often wonder, like, what is the value of a broker? And I think it's a really important question to ask, because even though, right, we're incentivized to say, oh, always. That's not always.
Yeah.
I would say generally, if you're looking for an apartment below $5K, you're probably better off doing it yourself. And it's going to take time, and we certainly empathize with the frustration.
Challenging, yeah.
I always, when people ask or seek out help and it's kind of below that price point, we always say, think about it like planning a wedding. You could DIY it, and you don't have to pay a wedding planner, but you're going to take up a lot of time, or you could, and it could be a frustrating experience. And then, or you could hire someone and help. And I think some of the activity and the all the effort to just get a rental deal done recently kind of drives home that point that for some people it is worth it. And once you get above that price point, we're talking about higher end rentals, 10, 20, 30, 40. I mean, the prices have, even on the high end, I'm
it's still challenging.
Shocked.
Inventory across the board, right? Is really a challenge right now. And I think, just to go back and add to what you were just saying, I think it's not that we're dismissive necessarily of a potential client looking under like a 5K, but it's the pay off for them, the cost to engage a broker, the limited inventory. It's just challenging, and probably easier for them to do it on their own versus somebody at a slightly higher price point is actually, I don't know what I'm saying about that, because I don't.
Well, I think it's important just to be very straight with people and say, listen, this is the cost, and we know, because we've done this a lot, the work that goes into it, even if it might not be as evident from the outside. There are elements of negotiation, just like if you were purchasing a place, and you go through a lease, and there are different riders that you might need to negotiate with the landlord, and having an understanding of the market and knowing, what's reasonable, what you could push for and when to pull back, especially if you're in a competitive market. We just went through that with a property which we knew was going to be competitive, and we're able to keep it off market and get it for our clients. But that meant being a little bit less pushy with the landlord, because they know that they have an asset that's desirable, and we're asking them to bring it to our clients and not put it to the market.
But two things you just made me think of. One is, people, New York is perhaps the most unique market in terms of the rental process, because we have the strongest tenants' rights laws in the nation. So, it's always, the criteria for placing a tenant is really high. It's typically, and it's a general rule of thumb, landlords are looking for income that's 40 times the rent, right? Plus good credit. And not everybody has that. So therefore, sometimes you require guarantors. And those guarantors, either if it's a family member within the tri-state area, must have 80 times the rent, income of 80 times the rent, or you engage a separate entity, a corporation, a company that
third-party
acts as a guarantor. So there's a certain protocol required, and that's part of the value that we as brokers bring to help really potential tenants and clients of ours navigate that process. The other thing I wanted to say is, because this is also a recent transaction for us, is and the value that a broker can bring is relationships, because you're right, these particular clients lost out on 3 or 4 properties, but then based on a relationship that you had, you were able to identify off-market property and get them in before it hit the market. And that's the lease they signed. So, we do bring value, a lot of value, and particularly in a market like this where inventory is already is really concentrated, really tight. So
I want to go back to that one point that you made about why renting in New York can feel so much more complicated than other places. And it is a really important point that it's almost completely driven by how strong the tenants' rights are.
Right.
And if you are thinking from a landlord's perspective, they want to make sure that they are vetting someone.
That's right.
As well as they can to ensure that that person is going to make good on their financial obligation.
It's going to be a responsible tenant.
Because to evict someone in New York, it can take years, tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and that's a tough pill to swallow. And also, not to mention, you're likely, when that process is playing out, that tenant is not paying any rent. And I think there's often this impression that not all landlords are these kind of Goliath companies. A lot of apartments are still owned by families.
Someone independent,
And so for them, it's they depend on that for making improvements and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that's also just that's the system, the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I bring that up is because if you, as a potential tenant or a renter, kind of put your landlord hat on for a second, it kind of helps to understand why you're being asked for all of this, because sometimes the difference between securing the apartment that you want and not is just being prepared.
Right.
Having everything ready to go. Having everything zipped up and all the documentation. It's so much easier for them to say yes that way.
And what is that documentation? Because you say, we're talking about all the things that are being prepared, but that's part of what the value that we bring to the table is getting tenants prepared. And what is that? What are
the standard tax returns, pay stubs, employment verification, slightly different for guarantors, but
landlord reference
much of the
letters,
same. Landlord reference letters, all of those things.
Employee reference, employer rather.
And there's a specific way that landlords like to see that. And again, how we think about it is we want to reduce as much friction as possible so that it's very easy to say no.
And that kind of hand-holding, guidance, expertise is what we bring to the table, not just for tenants, but also that's applicable, because I just had this conversation recently with a client, a buyer of ours in the condo co-op, in the sales market, and particularly in co-ops. It's the idea of vetting, of representing your clients, making sure they're prepared to move forward, that they have everything in place, that we have everything in place, ready to pounce the moment we land on something. And that's particularly of value in a market like this where inventory is so tight, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of competition. Yeah. So, it's not just applicable in the rental market, but also in the sales market.
Yeah. And I think it's a great, segue into how we run a real estate business, and part of it is dealing with the cyclicality, and I think, understanding how a broker operates and how they make money and who they have to give some of that to, and all those things can help understand that, when you're seeing these big commissions, it's not necessarily exactly
that's not what you're actually netting,
exactly,
actually depositing in your account. But
we'll save that for next time.
That's funny. Yeah.
Anyway.